There's a moment that happens in thousands of American homes tonight. Right now, actually. The house is finally quiet. Kids are asleep. The day is done. And someone is sitting alone at the kitchen table with their phone, staring at their bank account. The paycheck came in 2 days ago. The bills are paid. Nothing crazy was bought this month. But the number at the bottom of the screen feels wrong. Not dangerously low. Just thinner than it should be. And there's this quiet, uncomfortable question that comes up. Where did it all go? And then, right after that, is everyone else feeling this way? Or is it just me? Here's what most people don't know. It's not just you. And it's not because you did anything wrong. Right now, across every state in this country, millions of middle-class American families are living with a very specific kind of financial pressure. It's not the kind that comes from one bad decision. It's not gambling or impulse buying or refusing to budget. It's something quieter, something that's been building for years without most people even noticing it was happening. It's the slow, steady accumulation of expenses that don't look like problems when you're paying them. Expenses that feel completely normal, responsible even, the kind of things your parents did, your neighbors are doing, your coworkers talk about. Mortgages, car payments, groceries, childcare, healthcare, subscriptions you signed up for and forgot about. None of these things on their own seem dangerous. But here's what's actually happening underneath. These expenses, these habits, they're not just taking up space in your budget. They're creating a gap between what you earn and what you're able to keep, between the financial stability you thought you were building and the reality of how fragile things actually are. And the hardest part, the part that makes this so difficult to see, is that this erosion happens gradually. So gradually that by the time you realize something's off, years have already passed. You've been doing everything right, following all the conventional advice, working hard, making sacrifices, and yet somehow you're not getting ahead. You're just staying in place. Or worse, you're quietly falling behind. This isn't a story about failure. It's a story about a system that's changed while the advice we've all been given has stayed the same. And it's time we talk about what's really going on. Let's start with housing, because that's where a significant portion of this pressure begins. For decades, Americans have been told that owning a home is the cornerstone of financial security. It's an investment, a foundation, a sign that you've made it into the middle class. And on the surface, that logic still seems to hold. Homeownership offers stability that renting doesn't. Builds equity. It gives families a sense of permanence. But what's often left out of that narrative is the full cost of what homeownership actually requires. There's the mortgage payment, of course. For a family earning $70,000 or $80,000 a year, that payment might be somewhere between $1,200 and $1,800 a month, depending on where they live. That part is predictable. But then there's property tax, which in many states can add several $100s to the monthly burden. There's homeowners insurance, which has been climbing steadily in recent years, especially in areas prone to wildfires, hurricanes, or flooding. There are HOA fees in certain neighborhoods, sometimes $200 or $300 a month for services that feel more mandatory than optional. And then there's maintenance. This is the part that catches people off guard. When you rent, a broken water heater is the landlord's problem. When you own, it's a $1,200 emergency that has to be dealt with immediately. The roof starts leaking after a heavy storm. The HVAC system stops working in the middle of summer. The fence rots, the driveway cracks, the dishwasher dies. None of these things are luxuries. They're not indulgences. They're simply the cost of keeping a house functional. And financial advisors will often say that homeowners should budget 1% to 2% of their home's value each year for maintenance and repairs. For a house worth $300,000, that's $3,000 to $6,000 annually. But most families don't set that money aside. They can't. It's already spoken for by other expenses. So when something breaks, it goes on a credit card, or it comes out of savings that were meant for something else, or it just gets deferred until it becomes a bigger, more expensive problem. The same pattern shows up with transportation. In most parts of America, owning a car isn't a choice. It's a necessity. Public transit systems are either non-existent or insufficient for the realities of where people live and work. Commutes are long. Errands are spread out. Kids need to be driven to school, to sports, to doctor's appointments. So families own cars, often 2 of them, and those cars come with a long list of attached costs that extend far beyond the sticker price. There's the monthly payment if the car was financed, which for many households sits somewhere between $300 and $500 per vehicle. There's insurance, which varies wildly depending on age, location, and driving history, but can easily run $150 to $200 per car per month. There's gas, which fluctuates but averages out to something like $200 a month. For someone with a typical commute, there are oil changes, tire rotations, brake replacements, registration fees, inspections. And then, inevitably, there are repairs. A sensor fails. A battery dies. The transmission starts slipping. These aren't predictable expenses, but they're inevitable ones. And for a household that's already stretched thin, an unexpected $800 repair bill can be the difference between staying on track and falling behind. What's worth noting here is that none of these expenses, on their own, look unreasonable. A mortgage payment is expected. Car payments are normal. Maintenance and repairs are just part of life. But when you add them all together and you layer them on top of each other, month after month, they start to consume a much larger percentage of a family's income than most people realize. And because these costs are spread across so many categories, because they don't all hit at once, it's easy to lose sight of the cumulative weight. It just feels like life, like the way things are supposed to be. Then there's food, which is one of those expense categories that tends to quietly expand without anyone really noticing. Groceries are non-negotiable. Families have to eat, but the cost of feeding a household has risen significantly over the past several years. And not just because of inflation, it's also because of how food shopping has changed. Convenience has become a priority, and convenience costs more. Prepackaged meals, pre-cut vegetables, grab-and-go snacks, single-serving portions. These things save time. And for families where both parents are working full-time, time is often more valuable than money, so the grocery bill creeps up. What used to cost $400 a month now costs $600 or $700, and it doesn't feel like anything extravagant was purchased. It just costs more to fill the cart with the same basic staples. And then there's eating out, which has become so normalized that it barely registers as discretionary spending anymore. It's not fancy restaurants or celebratory dinners. It's grabbing breakfast on the way to work because there wasn't time to eat at home. It's picking up pizza on a Wednesday night because everyone is exhausted and no one has the energy to cook. It's meeting a coworker for lunch instead of packing something from home. Individually, these purchases are small. $10 here, $15 there, but they add up quickly. A family that eats out or orders takeout just twice a week can easily spend $300 or $400 a month without ever setting foot in an upscale restaurant. And because these expenses are scattered throughout the month, because they're tied to moments of genuine need or exhaustion, they don't feel like a problem. They feel like survival. Subscriptions represent another category of spending that has quietly embedded itself into the financial lives of most American households. These services are designed to be convenient, affordable, and easy to forget about. Streaming platforms, music services, cloud storage, meal kits, fitness apps, software subscriptions, premium memberships. Each one costs somewhere between $5 and $20 a month. Each one, when considered individually, seems perfectly reasonable. But most households aren't subscribed to just one or two services. They're subscribed to 5, 10, sometimes 15. And because these charges are automated, because they come out of the account without any conscious decision being made each month, they become invisible. People stop thinking about them. They stop evaluating whether they're actually being used or whether they're still worth the cost. They just keep renewing month after month, year after year. And when you add them all up, it's not uncommon for a household to be spending $200, $300, even $400 a month on subscriptions they barely think about. Childcare is another expense that deserves attention, because for families with young children, it's often one of the single largest line items in the budget. Depending on where you live, full-time daycare for one child can cost anywhere from $800 to $2,000 a month. For two children, that number can easily exceed $3,000. And this isn't optional spending. It's what allows parents to work. It's what makes a dual-income household possible. But the math becomes brutal very quickly. For someone earning $50,000 or $60,000 a year, daycare costs can consume a quarter or even a third of their take-home pay. And that's before taxes, before health insurance premiums, before retirement contributions. For many families, one parent's entire salary effectively goes toward childcare, with just a little bit left over. And yet they keep working because stopping would mean losing healthcare benefits, losing career momentum, losing future earning potential. So they pay the daycare bill and they absorb the financial strain, and they tell themselves it's temporary, that it'll get easier once the kids are in school. But by the time that happens, Other expenses have usually risen to fill the gap. Healthcare is another area where middle-class families are feeling a squeeze that's become difficult to ignore. Even for people who have employer-sponsored health insurance, the out-of-pocket costs have been climbing steadily. Premiums are higher, deductibles are higher, copays are higher. Routine doctor's visit might cost $40 or $50. A specialist visit could be twice that. Prescription medications, even with insurance, can run hundreds of dollars a month for someone managing a chronic condition. And if something more serious happens, if someone needs surgery or gets hospitalized or requires ongoing treatment, the bills can be staggering. Families with good insurance still find themselves facing $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 in out-of-pocket expenses for a medical event that wasn't optional, wasn't preventable, and wasn't their fault. And because medical debt doesn't come with a payment plan that feels manageable, it often ends up on a credit card where it starts accruing interest at 15 or 20%, turning a bad situation into a long-term financial burden. Credit cards, in fact, have become one of the most quietly destructive financial tools in the lives of middle-class Americans. They're useful, they're convenient, they offer rewards, fraud, protection, and a buffer for emergencies. But they also make it incredibly easy to spend money that isn't there. And for families that are already living paycheck to paycheck, that are already stretched thin by housing and transportation and food and childcare, credit cards become a way to bridge the gap. And because the minimum payment is low, because it's usually just $50 or $100 a month, it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels manageable, but the balance doesn't go down. It goes up, and the interest keeps compounding. A $2,000 balance can take years to pay off if you're only making minimum payments, and by the time it's gone, you've paid $3,000 or $4,000 total. But most people don't carry just one balance. They carry multiple. And the cycle becomes self-perpetuating. You use the card to get through a tough month. You make the minimum payment. You use it again the next time something comes up. And slowly, quietly, the debt grows. Student loans add another layer of pressure, particularly for younger middle-class families. Many people who are now in their 30s and 40s graduated college with tens of thousands of dollars in student debt. And unlike other forms of debt, student loans don't go away easily. They can't be discharged in bankruptcy. They follow you for decades, and the monthly payments, which often range from $200 to $600, depending on how much was borrowed, represent money that can't be used for anything else. Can't go toward a down payment on a house. Can't go into a retirement account. Can't be saved for emergencies. It just leaves the account every month, paying down a balance that feels like it barely moves. And for people who are trying to build financial stability, trying to save, trying to get ahead, those student loan payments are a constant weight. A reminder that a decision made at 18 or 20 years old is still shaping their financial reality 15 or 20 years later. Retirement savings, or the lack of it, is another quiet crisis that's unfolding across middle-class America. Financial advisors recommend saving 15% of your income for retirement. But for most households, that's simply not realistic. After the mortgage, the car payments, the groceries, the childcare, the healthcare, the debt payments, there's often nothing left to save. And even for people who are contributing to a 401k, the amounts are usually modest. 3%, 5% may be enough to capture an employer match if they're lucky, but nowhere near the 15% that would actually provide financial security in retirement. And because retirement feels distant, because it's decades away and the present is so demanding, it's easy to rationalize putting it off, to tell yourself you'll catch up later when things are less tight, when the kids are older, when the debt is paid down. But later rarely comes. The financial pressure doesn't ease, just shifts. And the years pass and the retirement accounts stay thin, and the gap between what's been saved and what will actually be needed grows wider. What makes all of this particularly insidious is that none of these financial habits look like mistakes when you're in the middle of them. They look like responsible choices, like the things you're supposed to do. You're supposed to own a home. You're supposed to have reliable transportation. You're supposed to feed your family. Well, you're supposed to invest in your children's education and activities. You're supposed to have health insurance. You're supposed to save for retirement. These aren't reckless behaviors. They're not signs of poor judgment or financial illiteracy. They're the basic building blocks of a middle-class life. But the math has changed. The cost of maintaining that life has risen faster than wages have kept pace, and the safety net that used to exist, the margins that used to provide breathing room, have disappeared. What we're left with is a situation where millions of American families are doing everything they've been told to do, following all the conventional advice, working hard, making sacrifices, and still finding themselves financially fragile. Still living paycheck to paycheck despite earning incomes that should, in theory, provide stability. Still one unexpected expense away from a crisis. And the psychological toll of that is real. There's stress, there's anxiety, there's shame. Because when you're struggling financially despite doing everything right, it's hard not to internalize that as personal failure. Hard not to wonder what you're doing wrong, what you're missing, why everyone else seems to be managing when you're barely holding on. But the truth is, it's not personal failure. It's structural. It's the result of an economic system where the cost of living has outpaced wage growth for decades, where housing prices have skyrocketed while salaries have stagnated, where healthcare costs have exploded, where childcare has become unaffordable, where education requires taking on crushing debt, where the definition of middle-class stability keeps expanding to include more and more expenses that are treated as non-negotiable, while the income required to actually sustain that lifestyle has become increasingly out of reach for the people who are supposed to be living it, and the habits that have developed in response to this pressure, the reliance on credit, the subscriptions that accumulate, the deferred maintenance, the delayed savings. These aren't character flaws. They're adaptations. They're the ways that people have learned to cope with a system that demands more than it provides. They're survival strategies that have become so commonplace, so normalized, that they've stopped looking like warning signs and started looking like just the way things are. The question, then, is what happens next, because these habits, these patterns, they're not sustainable indefinitely. Credit card balances can't grow forever. Retirement can't be postponed indefinitely. Maintenance can't be deferred without consequences. At some point, something has to give. And for many families, that point is closer than they think. It might be a job loss. It might be a health crisis. It might just the slow realization that the trajectory they're on doesn't lead anywhere good. That working harder, earning more, doing everything right isn't actually closing the gap. It's just keeping them in place. There's no simple fix for this. No single habit that, if changed, would solve everything. Because the problem isn't really about individual habits. It's about a set of economic conditions that have made middle-class financial security harder to achieve, and harder to maintain than it's been in generations. But there is value in seeing the pattern, in recognizing that the pressure you're feeling isn't unique, isn't personal, isn't a reflection of your worth or your competence. It's shared, it's structural, and it's worth talking about. Because the first step toward changing any system is naming it, is making visible the forces that have been operating quietly in the background, is refusing to accept the narrative that financial struggle is always a personal failing, and starting to ask harder questions about why the middle class, the group that's supposed to represent stability and security, is feeling anything but. Maybe you've felt this pressure yourself. Maybe you've sat at that kitchen table late at night, staring at your bank account, wondering where the money went. Maybe you've made all the right choices and still felt like you're falling behind. If that's you, I'd be curious to hear what that experience has been like. What's the one expense in your life that surprised you most? With how much it actually costs? Drop a comment and let's talk about it. And if this video resonated with you, if it helped you see your situation a little more clearly, consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. There are more conversations like this one coming, and I think they matter. Thanks for watching.